I've seen the other side. It's probably where everyone goes. You too. It's dark. I hope I'm wrong about it.
I like simulator games. I like the monotony, the planning, the scheduling, and the waiting. I love watching my numbers go up, whether it's money, points, levels, you name it. Obenseuer is a simulator game. A very good simulator game. But it has one problem. The moment you start the game, the city is rotting, your character is dying, and it's all your fault. Hey friends, my name is Bencho, and welcome to Overhead, a showcase series on games that I find interesting, different, or just plain worth making a video about. I want to thank everyone for the kind words and suggestions you all had on my last video, which I'll link below. It's exciting that there's so many of you as passionate about this as I am, and I really hope I can make it all worth your time. Anyways, without further ado, video games. Obenseuer, lovingly pronounced Open Sewer, is a life simulator released in early access on Steam in 2018 by Loiste Interactive, a relatively young studio started by Oskari Samiola in the town of Helsinki in the Uusimaa region of Finland. This is their second game released, and exists in the same universe as the studio's first title, Infra. Both games share common themes: infrastructure, decay, and poverty. In this video, I will of course be giving an overhead view of the game as a whole, but I will also be discussing the definition of simulator games, exploring the use of stress as a gameplay element, a brief dive into lore of Stallberg, the city in which the game takes place, as well as sharing the experience of what it was like to find my rhythm in the rotting streets of Obenseuer. I was also able to email back and forth with Oskari, the founder of Loiste Interactive, and I've added in some of their insight where appropriate, and I will be posting the written interview in the comments below, if you're interested. Alright, let's begin. Okay, before I get into how Obenseuer plays, let's talk about simulator games. Odds are, you know what a simulator game is. Much like how calling a game a roguelike explains virtually nothing about it, even if you add other descriptives like survival roguelike or roguelike deck builder, simulators suffer from the same problem. You could call a game a life simulator or a management simulator or a crafting simulator, etc., and you'd never really capture the full breadth of the game you describe. But when I say you know what a simulator is, I mean that anecdotally. When I see the word simulator online, the first games that come to mind are Supermarket Simulator, House Flipper, Power Washing Sim, Rust. Do you see a connecting thread there? Not really? Exactly. These games are arguably wildly different from each other, yet they all fall under the same simulator moniker, because ultimately, regardless of other genres they may also encompass, you are managing something. Whether it's running a simulation of a supermarket, survival on an apocalyptic island, or designing a house, you are managing something. Okay? Cool. Now you can't get mad at me when I don't describe Obenseuer as a management survival building crafting simulator game with RPG elements. And we're all on the same page when I say in Obenseuer, you're managing things. One of the things you manage, and the one that your character's whole life revolves around, is a dilapidated apartment complex at the edge of town's quarantine zone. Yes, the quarantine zone. The game takes place in the fictional city of Stallberg, a city established in Loiste Interactive's previous title, Infra, as run by corrupt and negligent bureaucrats who have decided that a hefty year-end bonus is worth more to them than keeping the city they run from dissolving underneath them. We enter into the game after an outbreak of highly addicting parasitic green fungus has taken over the city, and in an attempt to stem the spread, the rulers of Stallberg has designated the already impoverished district of Obenseuer as a quarantine zone, where they relocate all infected Stallberg residents into. You are one of these unfortunate residents. Now, this is usually where the developers employ one of the oldest tricks in the book and pull the classic "I shouldn't be here" technique, where you, the main character, is wrongfully placed in a terrible situation and you need to figure out a way to escape. But in Obenseuer, this is not the case. My dear friends, you very much deserve to be here. You see, the game starts with an interview by a panel of anonymous elite. They ask you simple questions like, do you ever feel dizzy? Why were you relocated? Or do you have any relatives? And as the player, the answers you give paint the portrait of who you are, as well as affect how you will experience the game. Are you a mushroom addict? Are you an alcoholic? Are you poor? Or are you in denial? Once the interview is completed and all your sins are laid bare, so to speak, the interviewers then inform you of the one caveat, the single silver lining you have before you cross the threshold into your new prison, the tenement building. Unknown even to the interviewers why, but you've been given an entire multi-unit, not entirely finished, apartment building for free. Awesome, cool, and dare I say, epic. You'll realize, however, sooner rather than later that despite this so-called boon, your time in Obenseuer won't be a bed of roses. Once entering Obenseuer and after a brief conversation with the woman outside the gate, you can make your way to your new tenement building. You're of course free to just wander the district of Obenseuer at this point, but even if you beeline to your objective, you'll be greeted with a taste of what you can expect to deal with in your time here, the toll gate. That's right. No such thing as a free lunch, or I guess in this case, no such thing as free housing in Obenseuer. To even enter the apartment area, you have to pay a $10 fee, and if that wasn't enough, once you actually get inside the building, you'll realize that it's only several degrees away from being its own little condemned biohazard. Each room not blocked off by warning signs looks as though they should have been. Trash, rot, and the hazardous green mushrooms litter the floor of each flat. Graffiti coats the walls, and it appears the building already has a long-term resident, Malone Patronus. Malone is a stubborn bastard who's adamant to exercise his squatter rights, but also provides helpful information on how to improve your new property. He provides the blueprints to each apartment, a menu in which you can view what rooms are safe to renovate and repair, and later on, an overview of the tenants that will hopefully occupy them. He also directs you to where these renovations can be purchased, as well as suggestions on making money. With the tenement building under your ownership and a general direction given, you're free to explore Obenseuer and, figure it out. It's time I come clean. When I first played this game, I was willfully ignorant. I've played this flavor of simulator before, time and time again, and fancied myself a bit of an expert. What that ended up translating to was skipping every single dialogue box an NPC threw at me. I can't really defend why I do this, and I know I'm not alone in it, but I usually am a gameplay first, story later individual. I don't bother to waste my time with reading if most of the time I'm going to receive a pop-up or a quest that will tell me in a quarter of the words what was important to glean from that conversation. I consider the story a small little treat after I've maxed out my stats, money, or whatever point system I'm working with. Somewhere deep inside, I knew that this would bite me in the ass one day, and oh boy, would you look at the size of the chompers on Obenseuer. Let me walk you through what my first playthrough looked like. Alright, well, I need to make some money, so let's go to that farm what's-his-name told me to go to. Great, here I am. Okay, so cool, he wants turnips or whatever, I'll just put these down here and, oh shit, it's like that real-time growing mechanic, whatever. I'll just dig around in the trash for bottles and cans while I wait. Oh look, free food, and it glows too, neat. Okay, this is quite the haul, so let me go turn these in for cool, crisp dollar bills. Oh, that's it, huh? That's all I get? What can that even buy me? Week-old bread. Cool, whatever, as long as it gets rid of this scary red food symbol. Okay, let's check on the farm. Oh, right. I'm a raging alcoholic with a mushroom addiction. How could I forget? Good thing I found this perfectly good bottle of Osmo Alute, the best beer ever, in a trash can next to those biohazard bags. I don't even have to worry about mushrooms. They grow in my pantry for free. It's already getting dark and I look pretty tired. I guess I'll go back to my super safe apartment and hit the hay. Good morning, day 2. Let's get this bread, is what I would say if sleeping here wasn't the worst mistake of my fucking life. I'm in the red pretty much damn near everywhere, plus it looks like I'm a little sad too. No idea why. But hey, this is fine though. These kind of games always start like this, right? Let's go check on our farm and we'll figure out how to turn that frown upside down on the way there. Looks like our turnips are done. This should net us a nice amount of cash. 43 bucks. I made that digging in the trash in one day. I can barely afford a bottle of water and a moldy tomato with that. Plus, I just keep getting sadder. Maybe the pharmacy has something? Okay, depression medicine.
34 RM.
Okay, so I have to get
34 RM.
make myself not depressed. That means I have to spend all day looking for bottles. Don't forget to plant some vegetables. Okay, I gotta get some money around here. As for a safe bet, it looks like there's 20 OCs. Done yet? Oh, right. Okay, looks like my alcohol level sells. Now I need that. I don't know how I'm going. I stopped playing the game at this point. I figured this was a lost cause. I began doing what any rational gamer does and make excuses for myself why I stopped. It's a small studio who never made a simulator game before. They didn't know what they were doing, or maybe it was a pretentious attempt to promote the message of poverty sucks and life is hard. The truth was, I was in denial, and I simply just got too stressed playing the game and gave up. Let's talk about that for a moment. Stress in video games is not uncommon. In fact, I believe stress is a vital aspect to what makes them dynamic and engaging to play. It's just rarely, if ever, used as a selling point when pitching games to a potential player. It's usually hidden through various buzzwords like hardcore gaming experience, or featuring challenging gameplay mechanics, or and knuckles. So to put it plainly, Obenseuer is stressful. I mean, it's obvious if you bothered to make more than a passing glance at everything presented in the first 10 minutes that this was going to be at the very least thematically intense, but I'm just going to assume I'm not the only one who overlooks things in a video game. Games were meant for fun and entertainment after all. If a game was neither of those things, I don't believe it would succeed in the eyes of the general public. But as time's gone by and as the video game market has become the oversaturated giant we know today, our definition of what is fun and entertaining has expanded. So a game where you play a drug-addicted landlord in a quarantine slum digging in trash to earn enough of the made-up local currency to buy a moldy piece of bread can have a nearly 90% approval rating on Steam and a thriving community around it. There is the question, however, at what point is it too much? Is Obenseuer too stressful? Why subject yourself to more stress when odds are you get more than enough of it from your daily life? Well, the answer is simple. Control.
I'm no psychologist, but I can Google, and I can read. I think. I'm still trying to figure out that secret letter the government doesn't want you to know about. But when you Google what causes stress, the lists you'll come across say in one form or another that one of the top contributors to stress are life events and daily challenges that fall outside one's control. Examples being death in a family, expectations in work, unexpected financial hardship, or uncertainty for the future. It's safe to say it's normal and maybe even expected to feel at least some percentage of uneasiness when facing challenges you can't directly take action against. So when we ask the question again, why subject ourselves to additional stress? It's because we can get rid of it. Imagine if you could wipe away your school debt or cure a chronic illness through a series of predictable menial tasks or button presses. Suddenly, the stress would disappear, right? With certainty comes peace of mind. So to get to my point, I can speak with certainty that Obenseuer is indeed a stressful game, but within all that stress lies a solution to remove it. You just have to find your rhythm.
When I first played the game, I went into it expecting a certain level of stress. And when I was confronted with more than I expected is when a more realistic flavor of stress began seeping its way in, which is why I initially gave up. So for a while, I sat and stewed on my failed attempt, which didn't last long. It was, after all, just a game, and I'm a grown-ass man, so I got over it quickly. But eventually, the itch to play a simulator game came crawling back, which happens more often than not, and I found myself opening up Obenseuer once again and starting over. Now, all that I said about stress and control were not conclusions I had made after my first attempt. Those are, of course, observations I'm making now for this video. But I'm aware of how I usually try to tackle a challenging problem, video game or otherwise, which is to take it very, very slowly. I was cocky my first try. I rushed things in a vain attempt to get to the good brain itch number go up dopamine hit that I do so enjoy in my video games. So this time, I took it one day at a time. As much as I hate to admit it, I actually paid attention to the NPC dialogue. So briefly, this is what my second attempt looked like. Day 1. I knew only a few things. I'm poor, I'm addicted to alcohol, cigarettes, and glowing green mushrooms. I was infected with a disease that was slowly killing me, but at what rate I was not being shown, and that I have an apartment complex full of dirty, empty rooms locked behind a paywall of $10 of the local currency. As seen from my previous attempt, it looked like drinking, smoking, and shrooming it up funky style were going to be a daily activity for me no matter what else happened. So I had to figure that into my daily schedule and budget. The woman outside of the gate tells you about the hostel that provides safe beds, information I could have known before previously trying to sleep on a pile of biohazard waste. Outside the hostel also happens to be a pea soup truck that provides a free bowl of soup every day with the stipulation that you participate in prayer with the man dishing it out. For all you Reddit warriors out there, don't worry, the prayer isn't secretly increasing your Jesus meter. So having actually paid attention this time, I made my way to the pea soup cart and the hostel. With my previous knowledge that bottles and cans provided quick cash, I made sure to check every box, every bin, dumpster, and crate on my way to my location. I got my pea soup from Jesus' #1 fan and entered the hostel. I knew that bed comfort and safety were important now, so I had to figure the hostel into my budget until I secured my own accommodations. I walked around the hostel area on my hunt for cans and bottles, but also took notice of the water cooler near the front desk. In my previous playthrough, the only clean water I was aware of was the overtly priced water sold at the convenience store. Turns out daily there's about 5 liters of clean water that you can get for free from the hostel, as long as you have enough empty bottles to collect it. So already I had secured food and clean water for the day. So the rest of the day was spent exploring wherever I could reasonably get into to look for every single bottle, can, or empty milk carton I could find. The game starts you off with half a pack of cigarettes and a couple of cheap beers, so I wasn't worrying about my addictions yet. I knew I could at the very least stave them off for a couple days while I got my bearings. So at the end of the day, with every bottle and can I could find stuffed into my jorts, and my lungs and liver screaming at me to poison them, I finally made my way to the apartment, paid the $10 fee and spoke to Malone, got the blueprints for my tenement, and took note of the farm job and renovation services he mentions. He also mentions that I should clean up the apartment on the bottom floor and claim it as my own. The same apartment I slept terribly in my first playthrough. This time, instead of drop kicking myself into a pile of trash and sleeping in it, I set out to clean up what I could and take inventory of what I had. It looked like I had a bed, a couple of storage containers, a few lights, and some various objects I could use for decoration. I also had a sawhorse which I could use to craft planks from logs. After cleaning up what I could without disinfectant or bleach, I fed my liver and lungs a healthy meal as a little treat, made my way back to the hostel, and called it a day. A much more calming and metered day followed. I got up, used what amenities I could, filled up my bottles, and got back to work. It wasn't until the 3rd or 4th day I made my way to the renovator's office. It was made clear to me that getting tenants into the apartment was going to be the best way to secure decent and reliable income for myself. Bottles and cans refreshed in game every 24 hours, but I wasn't guaranteed the same amount each day. Renovations are relatively simple. Each apartment has a series of amenities that need fixing or upgrading to meet the requirements for different potential renters around the district. In my explorations from the days prior, I talked with a handful of the residents and found I could ask them if they needed a place to stay. I found a lone artist who had very, very low and achievable standards. I needed to upgrade the wall and build a rudimentary bathroom in one of the apartments, which would put me back a few thousand OC as a down payment and a couple hundred RM, which was to be paid upon completion. I hadn't mentioned this earlier, but RM, or real money, is the currency of Stahlberg. But since Obenseuer is so disconnected with the rest of the city and no one is allowed to leave, they developed their own currency to make bartering and employment simpler, since the flow of real money into Obenseuer was unpredictable and therefore unreliable. There's a currency exchange on the top floor of the hostel building, so it's a good idea to get familiar with the conversion rates, which, don't worry, the conversion rates fucking suck. I had already saved enough OC for the initial down payment, and the game starts you with enough RM to afford, at the very least, one of the 2 upgrades needed. All I needed now was supplies. Boards, nails, and all the other fixings needed for renovation could be found in the same locations you get bottles and cans, but rarely. It'll save you money to collect them and store them at the renovation office, but turns out there's also a market near the convenience store that sells exactly what you need for OC, something I didn't bother noting my first time playing. I'm going to skip ahead here, to spare you from essentially providing the audiobook equivalent of a Let's Play, and just say that I eventually secured enough cash to renovate the apartment and get my first tenant, who has provided me now with a daily income of roughly 900 OC. At this point, daily expenses were covered. I could afford to eat and drink daily, and even sleep in the hostel every day until I finished my own apartment. I had finally gained control. Thank you for being patient with me while I relived my unnecessarily traumatic initial experience with the game. As a reward, we can finally talk about the good stuff. Once you no longer have to worry about your day-to-day life, you can start fucking around and finding out. I focused so heavy on the stress of this game and figuring out how not to have a bad time so much in the beginning of the video, because what comes after that is kind of ridiculous. Now, what I'm going to talk about next is technically spoilers, even though the game is unfinished and subject to change. So if you don't want to hear it, skip ahead to here in the video, because next we're going to talk about the story of Obenseuer. Oh, also, there's a pretty significant ARG, or alternate reality game, happening since Loiste Studios' first game Infra was released. I won't get into the details here. If you're interested, you can check out the Loiste Discord and Wiki for more info, which I'll be linking below in the description. As it stands now, there really isn't a complete in-game story, so since the story is not complete, most of what I'm going to talk about are assumptions based on my personal experience playing the game, a few observations I've made, and what info I could find on the wiki, which, to my surprise, has an entire faux historical timeline starting from a geological event in 5000 BC and Stahlberg's founding in the mid-1200s. The game takes place in the year 2026 in the city of Stahlberg, a fictitious European city with a history of federal negligence dating all the way back to World War II, to the point where current-day Stahlberg is practically run by privately owned corporations. As established in the last game, Infra, which takes place also in Stahlberg sometime earlier in 2016, there is a major infrastructure issue. A hostile takeover of several vital industrial companies and their subsequent closures has only made matters worse. Then came the Stahlberg mushroom virus. In 2017, glowing green mushrooms are found growing in the neglected waterways of Stahlberg. In addition to being highly contagious and capable of growing on live human subjects, they also happen to be incredibly addictive psychoactive drugs. Infected victims are rounded up and placed into Obenseuer, a municipality that was merged into Stahlberg proper in 1973 and used as a universal dumping ground, sometimes on accident, but mostly on purpose. The already overcrowded Obenseuer, filled to the brim with low-income and displaced homeless citizens, now faces a housing crisis when the infected are forced into one of its districts and a significant portion is subsequently walled off and deemed a quarantine zone. As mentioned at the beginning of the video, this is where you come in. As one deemed infected with SMV, you are forced to move to Obenseuer's quarantine zone. Strangely enough, you've also inherited an entire multi-level unfinished apartment building, much to the surprise of your interviewers at the front gate. Once you establish yourself and begin generating income, you can begin exploring the streets of Obenseuer. Obviously, most of the characters you meet are also displaced and are in various forms of poverty, although a select few have managed to carve out some semblance of a life here. To give a couple examples, there's Malone, your resident squatter whose shady history connects him to various contacts in Obenseuer, or Penty, the owner of the speakeasy below Tenement A, whose bar, while being a great source for quality hooch, also has this guy in it. For the most part, however, the people you'll meet in Obenseuer are just in need of a safe place to live. One thing I started noticing once I'd found my rhythm was that one way or another people were surviving, against all odds. I'd say, at least as it stands now, a message about human resilience and persistence may not be the primary focus for the developers, judging from the conversation I had with Oskari, but something I found easy to remark on when I really started getting into it. A lot of games just throw you into them, and you're expected to just figure it out. And it may be a stretch to say this, and believe me when I say I know this is not the most realistic comparison to make, but I think that feeling of figuring it out in a video game is in some ways a small fragment of the same feeling you'd have when you have to adapt to problems in real life. Echoes of the cog turning and mental gymnastic one goes through when making sure they have a place to sleep tonight, or food and water for the week, can be felt when engaging in something like Obenseuer. And to be perfectly clear, no. I don't think pressing buttons and watching shapes and colors move on a screen is anywhere close to the day-to-day struggle of poverty that millions go through every day. I'm just making a dramatic and exaggerated YouTuber way of saying that Obenseuer uses aspects of real life to accentuate the atmosphere of their game. Something you think would be an obvious thing to do for a life simulator, but one I find is lacking in most, if not all, of the ones I've personally played. And hey, if you think this is a crazy take, consider yourself lucky that's the only out-of-pocket comparison I've made, okay? I'm a living, breathing, out-of-pocket comparison machine. You just haven't been locked in a dark enough room with me yet. I haven't even mentioned the weird stuff. The red mushrooms, the dark supernatural roots taking hold of the city, or the dark amulet, or Morco. You're very lucky I haven't mentioned Morco. The game does something rather remarkable and creates intrigue and mystery without railroading the player into it. I'm not kidding when I say you can sink 100 hours into this game purely playing Landlord Simulator Quarantine Edition without ever touching the quests, and you'd still have a satisfying game. But if you stray even a moment off the comfortable life sim path, things get really, really weird. I know I'd say I'd get to the good stuff here, but to be honest, I'm not sure if I want to tell you the specifics, because stumbling into these situations were some of the best interactions I've had in a simulator game. So instead of giving you the details, I'll just say a few choice phrases. Speaking to the dead, getting addicted to rubber ducks, and meeting Morco are all things you can do in this game. The speed at which this game goes from natural to supernatural is uncanny, and a welcoming change of pace to the usual sim game monotony. Before I wrap this up, I want to make a request. If you pick up Obenseuer, I highly recommend putting yourself in a mindset where you want to be immersed. As I'm sure my fellow simulator enjoyers would agree, world building and story are not primary features that draw you into a simulator game. No, you and I both know it's the numbers going up. But I highly recommend you really place yourself in the setting of this game. It's a majority of why I believe it to be one of the good ones. With plans to make a game set in Obenseuer since its conception in their previous game Infra, the team at Loiste Interactive put real thought into where you are and why, all within a genre of game that doesn't reward that effort. There's already so many mindless games out there. It's easy to fall into a loop of consumption, milling through games without much thought and allowing them to be time wasters. Now, I'm of the mind that if you're enjoying your time, you're not wasting it, but I also believe you're capable of compromising the quality of your time spent by allowing yourself to be unaware of how you go about spending it. There's nothing wrong with turning your brain off after a long day or week, but it's important you give that mush swimming up around there some enrichment once in a while and take time to really pay attention to something, even if that something's a video game about finding empty milk cartons in public toilets. Obenseuer, as it stands now, is incomplete, so I can't promise you a complete experience and give you a definitive statement on the endgame. I still recommend picking it up, however, because there's quite a bit of game to play in its current version, and I think if you enjoy the game now, you'll enjoy it even more when the devs release the Mines update later this autumn. Oskari himself stated in our conversation that it will almost double the amount of content in the game. Obenseuer is overall an incredibly engaging simulator game, and I hope some of you check it out. Again, I'd like to thank everyone who watched and left a comment on my last video. It really is awesome to see so many people into the same weird games I am, and such a relief that that video got to people equally passionate about them. If you're new here and haven't seen my last video, I'll link it below. I'd appreciate your input. I also stream over on Twitch Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. I usually play the games I make videos about after I post, so you can expect to see me playing Obenseuer sometime this week. We also have a Discord, which I'll link below. It's a small but fun community. We very recently just wrapped up a stream mascot competition, which birthed this little guy right here. And I've been planning more community events to do in the future, so drop by if you're chill with it. Anyways, I've got plenty more weird things to rant about, so expect more videos soon. I hope you have a good one. I'll see you next time.